So, dear colleagues, let's start our work. Let me introduce myself. My name is Alexey Guznov. I'm the State Secretary and head of the chairperson of the Bank of Russia. And today I'll be moderating this session that is about the regulation of digital innovations in the financial sector. So, it's the third day of our wonderful forum. We discussed a lot of topics and will continue discussing them. And if we remember Lermontov, then we can say that actually there are two sisters. So here we talk about the information and regulation when it comes to the financial market. So the financial market is interested in innovations. So all the wonderful projects can still be projects on paper, or maybe just some file on the disk, if we don't create good regulation conditions for them, if we don't find the balance between the interests and different benefits of social groups, business structures, and the state. So, creation of such an environment is the topic of our session today. So, recently, there was the report on the main trends in the financial market for 2024 through 2026, and we will be discussing this document on the 7th of December at the parliamentary hearings. Is that right? Yes, on the 4th of December. So the Bank of Russia, jointly with the government, will pay a lot of attention to the adaptation and creation of regulatory conditions for the contemporary technologies in the financial market. We will strive at launching the new financial services and technologies. Within the creation of the new technologies, the update of the regulatory framework should be faster than in the past. At the same time, the regulation should provide good conditions for the implementation of digital innovations on the one hand, and on the other hand, it should provide for the consumer protection and financial stability. So this is the view of the Bank of Russia, and I guess that it will be quite interesting for all of us to learn more about the regulation in the field of financial market, and it will be very interesting to hear the opinion of our speakers that are representatives of the government as well as the business community. So today our speakers are Anatoliy Aksakov, the head of the committee at the State Duma, the Committee on the Financial Market. And since 2006, he is the president of the Association of Regional Banks of Russia. Right, so now we say that it is the Association of Banks of Russia, not the Regional Banks of Russia Association. Unfortunately, running a bit late, but we'll be here in 10 minutes. Aleksandr Khinshteyn, the head of the Committee of the State Duma on Information Policy Communications. Also, we have Alena Rudenko, the State Secretary at the Ministry of Digital Development of the Russian Federation. So Alena has been on this post for not a very long time, and I would like to actually congratulate Alena with the appointment to this position, and I would like to wish Alena success. And we have Anatoliy Kozlachkov, the Vice President of the Association of Banks of Russia, and he is dealing with questions connected to regulation and the law. At the same time, we have Andrei Medvedev, the director of the legal department. And if needed, he will also speak from the regulator's point of view when it comes to the problems that will be discussed at this session, if the time allows. We have quite a busy agenda, and we should finalize our work at 10:30, because then we'll go to the plenary session. So before giving the floor to our speakers, I would like to express my gratitude to two chairpersons of the committee, and I guess Aleksandr Khinshteyn will also hear about this. So thanks to their efforts, the efforts of the profile committees, during the spring session this year, there were some amendments to the law that actually enabled the digital ruble project to start. This is a very important project for the community, for everybody, for Russia as a whole, and it's the future for us that was difficult but fruitful discussion. And during this discussion, we managed to overcome some differences, and we found some common ground when it comes to the problems of regulation. I guess that's a good example of how we can address problems that initially imply that there are some different approaches from the regulators, those that work in the financial market and those that work in the field of information. So, Anatoly, in the committee that you had, there are a lot of different projects that are aimed at improving the technologies in the financial field. I guess I can't list all of them, but I'll try just to name a couple of them, at least. Those are such issues that are connected to the improvement of legislation connected to digital rights, as well as those connected to improvement of regulation in the field of digital financial assets, utilitarian rights, to enable the use in the settlements of these assets. Also, these are the questions of cross-border settlements with the use of digital currencies, as well as the issues on the development of legislation in the experimental regimes for the financial field. We have draft laws that are quite difficult when it comes to their discussion. At the same time, I guess it's good to just say what is the situation now and what is the prospects, whether these draft laws will be adopted or not. So just to start our discussion. Right, thanks a lot. So, dear colleagues, Alexey, yesterday at the meetings of 4 committees considered the main fields, the main areas of the Bank of Russia's work when it comes to our financial policy. And I asked a question: can the central bank give some lengthy or long credit resources through a bank system that are colored, so to say, to support the structural shift in the economy, as well as to support the technological progress in the country? And Elvira, the head of the Bank of Russia, she said that these funds that are colored, so to say, in 2 stages of their processing can become non-colored, and it will increase the inflation. And today, one of my acquaintances said that he heard this idea on the use of these funds for loans for the economy with the use of the resources of the central bank. And the digital ruble was also suggested. So the digital ruble is a colored ruble, and it can involve all the algorithms that will keep it outside the consumer market. And so it will be just circulating in the economy, and it will finance the structural shift in the economy. And if any goods are needed, then the ruble can also be used there. So that means that the ruble will stay outside those consumer circulation, and that will mean that the inflation won't grow. And so I would like to actually enshrine it in the law, in the legislation, within some experimental regimes, or maybe just separately. So maybe a National Economic Bank and Central Bank could do an experiment, and they could experiment with the influence of the colored digital ruble, how it influences the inflation. We could implement a couple of projects. We could see how it works. We could see whether it really influences the inflation or not, and to what extent. I guess it's an interesting idea, and we should definitely test it. This is the first suggestion that I came up with after our discussion yesterday. I can respond to this. Right, so for central bank, the digital ruble is a ruble as it is, and it should have all the characteristics that our traditional ruble has. And when we get this characteristic of the colored ruble, then it loses some quality. We do have an experiment, and we do have an environment where we have this concept of painted money, or colored money, so to say. Yes, so actually this is a good way to finance the state order for the defense purposes. It will be very good for tracking the use of this money later on, and we could also limit this painted ruble in its circulation so that it doesn't go to the consumer's market. So that's the suggestion, Alexey. I would like to put it on the table now. And when we'll be discussing financial markets, we'll definitely raise this topic. Now I'd like to actually address the representative of the Ministry of Digital Development. Perhaps jointly we could work on this algorithm, and it could be quite a working one. There are some problems that are also connected to the current legislation. The one about the digital financial assets. It's already in force, and we've already issued the currency for about 50 billion rubles. So we expect that this figure will grow up to 60 billion rubles. So the progress is quite fast. So in May, this figure was 2.5 billion rubles, and now it's about 50 billion rubles. So the process is there, and it's about the digital financial assets. But still, there are some processes that we need to correct. And the issued DFAs are usually circulating in those information systems where they were issued. So they don't go beyond those information systems. And I guess that at the legislative level, we should enshrine such a provision that all the issued assets should be able to actually transfer from one information system to another one. It would be nice to have an algorithm on how to use the corresponding keys to be able to manage the transfer of DFAs from one information system to another one. I guess that here we need some legislative amendments. I see some smiles on the faces of the representatives of the central bank, but this is a topic that is now being discussed at the platform of the State Duma, and I guess that it requires some fixing in the legislation. There are about 10 issuers like this, and they are all using the same information systems. So basically, the DFAs are circulating in the systems where they were emitted. Right, so in the draft law and in the law on the digital financial assets, you were one of the authors of this law. There is a tool to address this problem. So this is the exchange operator. This is the role. But unfortunately, business is not very interested in that yet. Well, I guess that we should maybe push the business towards this a little bit more to make the system more dynamic. Right, I do agree with you, and we have one exchange operator that got this certificate, and we will see how this organization will work and whether they'll fulfill all the functions that you've mentioned. Well, actually, any operator of an information system can also get the functions of the exchange operator, and one doesn't need to get any additional functions. And another topic is about the taxation issues. It's about hybrid digital rights. This is about digital financial assets that are circulating, as well as utilitarian digital rights. And there is a system connected to the tax and accounting systems. And, well, it slows down the process of the utilitarian digital rights and hybrid digital rights. From my point of view, tax can also be asked for when some goods are provided, those that will be for the execution of the utilitarian digital rights. So I guess that this will be helpful for the emission of the subsequent digital instruments. Another topic is connected to the following. There are some emissions that are aimed at some specific consumers for the digital rights. And quite often, those who emit those rights, who grant these rights and get these rights as well, also take into account the sanctions. They don't really want to visualize this process. I mean, they don't want somebody to know that somebody gets these rights and somebody gives these rights. So it's kind of like a protected subscription that is not publicly visualized. It's also because of the sanctions, to protect those who are into this process when it comes to the sanctions. Because now we are obliged to publish it on the websites, and it can raise some questions in connection to the implementation of this idea.
If you allow me just one more question. The idea really does exist. What are the conditions of issuing the digital currencies? So within the framework, when one party agrees with the conditions of the other, including the subjects of what are the rights, what is the economical potential there? So if we have a look of the things when this information is kept hidden and the other party does not know about the contract and the details of it, the body that is being produced, the body of information, of course, is supposed to be known, and all of that should be given to all the regulators of the central bank, and should be followed, that none of the rules would be violated. Of course, I mean, regulators are regulators, but what about the normal people, the common people? The consumers should receive the full information. But the external parties that don't necessarily need to know everything, per se, they should not get it just like in the open source of the internet. And a different thing with regarding the issue of DFA, such as grain, such as gold. And, some of our partners, foreign partners, actually doing quite a lot of research on that. The partners from those countries that are friendly, when the currency that is used for the payment would be digital currencies, and those currencies would be used to pay for the grain or any other assets that are needed. I think probably around December we'll be actively implementing that, and of course the discussion has been held, and I think around the December we'll be there. And if we talk about the money and the digital currency, it's all on the agenda. We're a bit slow on really discussing it because the market is growing very rapidly, and the cryptocurrency people and those who do mining of cryptocurrency, I mean, they want to be engaged, and I think we do need to help them. We do need to help them, so these guys will not be concerned that somebody from the law enforcement would come to them. By the way, congratulations to the law enforcement on the holiday today. So what do I wish to the law enforcement colleagues? That they would have less work, especially to those who deal with cryptocurrency and crypto mining. I've already announced that that we want to invite the people with whom we were discussing sort of behind the stage these issues, but it's really interesting that, I mean, some of us in the Duma, in the State Duma, are quite interested in the topic, and we're discussing it very thoroughly. And I think in the first half of the next year, we'll launch a legislation for the first reading about these issues of the cryptocurrency environment and mining. Thank you, Anatoliy, and I'd like to continue our discussion as a dialogue, and I'm glad that it's happening. So, using the digital assets and digital rights and digital currencies in the payment, especially with the transporter payment. This approach and this opportunity is something that has been declared as sort of like a bit of an experiment in the legislature. There is a project in legislature about with regards to the financial market. There's been a lot of changes in the law there, in the law that regulates the financial market. But although the process is not easy and there are different kind of opinions out there, so to be honest, I mean, the whole sort of concept of mining with digital currencies, with adhering to the law, I mean, all of that should be taken as a whole and sort of considered in the right way, including this experimental digital sphere. Of course, you know, I might be mistaken, but one of the EPR and the process of creating sort of like processes without pilot projects. And you were one of the authors about the partnership financing. But what I'm talking about has the concrete decision by the structural persons that could perhaps get the support within this experimental financing. And the law about the digital currencies that was considered by you, it has a bit of a different approach. The way when the norms were set, and that cannot be stopped within this experimental financing. But what is your approach? What's your opinion? Let's start with what we actually have at the moment. This legislation proposes sort of like banning certain activities that are there, but I think we're open to those processes that are covered in the partnership financing. So the current legislation does not have some of the things that are in the partnership financing project legislation, but certain services, whether it's federal security, Ministry of Finance, central bank, there will be sort of like called upon to be transparent if there is certain mistakes. So you mean an independent law about this experimental financing? So, you know, like if we start talking, oh, here this thing is allowed, that thing is forbidden, central bank can do that, and Federal Service of Security can do that, and those guys can't. So it's something we gotta normalize it. Thank you very much for your comment, Alena. Question for you. One of the legislation that has been in your portfolio, I'm sorry. Yeah, the speaker is just asking for the door to be closed. So the legislation that deals with creation of the digital system to check the connection of the customers, and it was accepted in the first hearing, and it's still been sort of like in work in progress. There are different issues with that, especially when it comes to dealing with the personal data of the consumers. My question is more detailed, and I've got a couple other questions that may be wider. What is your opinion and attitude to the project? And in general, what do you think how things are organized, legally speaking, the protection of the personal data, especially within the context of the ecosystem, whenever the personal data has been exploited, without being too negative about it. But all different subjects of the ecosystem have been exploiting a lot of the personal data of the consumers for their own gain. So will that lead to sort of things getting worse? Or can we still protect it? And of course, about the digital legislation. And I hope that Mr. Khinshteyn would join so we could also ask for his opinion. But please share yours. So, talking about the first question, we're discussing all of that. We are sort of formulating the ideas and the concepts. But we think that using the personal data and monetizing of this personal data, it is under the law and legislation of what is happening. But I think that permission that is being given, whether to use or not to use the personal data by a different subject of the ecosystem, I'm not totally sure of what is actually to be happening there per se, but what we believe the subject using the personal data and how it's been processed should have a clear understanding, legally speaking, and in every other ways. Talking about the digital legislation, we were sort of appointed to work on that. We have a working group with different representatives, both from legislation, of executive powers and services, the administration of the president of Russia. We've got people from the security services. We've got senators and the rest. The working group had their first meeting where we were talking about the sort of like the new concept of what we can work on. We already got some feedback on that. And we've got different variety of actually representatives. We even talked to the High School of Economics to be one of those sort of like advisory a part of this working group. They're helping us quite a lot. So we worked on finishing up the concept of this digital legislation, and probably sometime towards the end of the month we'll be having our second meeting. What is happening right now? There are different ways and crossroads that we're sort of looking at. We're discussing what we do within the digital economy, and of course we do invite all of you to join and discuss with us. So what is the subject? What are the subject and the main issues within the crossroads of this digital legislation? We believe that it has to regulate the digital relationship that are out there. But this digital relationship that deals with information technologies or somehow sort of like on a bigger scale. So processing the data, will that be processed only within the information system? And will it deal only with the communication? Or we want to sort of involve the usage of the personal data and other issues. So first of all, we were sort of, as we were talking, that it's a digital legislation, and we thought that it can deal only with communications and the digital aspects. But right now, sort of like, as both members of the working group and other discussions that have been held there, with different representatives. We sort of think that the concept itself should be more expanded, and the information sort of rights and the legal part of it, and so I think we're open to the discussion of all of in all of those issues and subjects. So we're just talking about the concepts at the moment, and in more detail, that as we are developing this digital legislation, we first of all we want to what will be in the as a premise of that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, as far as I understand, the employees of the Bank of Russia are not the members of the working group that you mentioned, so please invite them as well. Yes, sure. So, you're a lawyer, right? And so, I'm sorry, but I will be a bit boring here, but I want to ask you, why did you come up with the idea of a code? So will this be a consolidated document that will guide the information field? Or will you use the codification in accordance with our current system? So how do you see this new legislative act? Why have you chosen the form of a code as a normative act? Right, so if we talk about the scientific topic here, then indeed, if we regulate information relationships in the field of ICT, so this should be a federal law, because it's about industry regulation, etc. But still, if we regulate information relationships, then it should be a codified act. So it will be more systematic, and it will have a full set of different rules: creation, processing, and generation of information. So we believe that this legislation should be a comprehensive one. It should be logical. I do agree that if it's a codified act, then there should be like a general part that will give the main principles. But I believe that we should choose a more classical approach here when we are building this code. So it's not that we will cancel all the other laws and just organize them in one. I think that we can take the cue from the civil code when we can organize everything like in a general document, a code, and then we can also get some details from some other documents. Okay, thank you. Why I asked this question is because in the end of the 90s, there was a talk about developing a bank code. And actually, colleagues from Belarus even made that happen. But now they are suffering because the tool is not as flexible as they would like to see it. So the information field reacts to the fast changing situation quite quickly. And so on the one hand, we can reach some level of systematization, but on the other hand, this could be an obstacle to the development of information field. Well, when we'll be developing this code, of course, we will take this all into account. But I believe that we really need to have some conceptual approach here, how we'll continue to develop this field. And if, as you said, and we discussed it, is if we have some details and specifics that will be regulated by some other federal laws, then it will make our system more flexible. So I see Anatoliy had a question. Right, just a comment from my side. I guess that the idea of digital code is the right one. On Wednesday we had a plenary session, and the head of the Bank of Russia spoke, and the heads of the departments, ministries that do the digitalization of business also spoke. Also, the mayor of Moscow, Mr. Sabarin, spoke at the panel. So the main idea is that, well, we are leaders in the field of digitalization. We are among the top 5 most digitalized countries in the field of finance. And obviously, we need to run even faster, especially against the sanctions. We should be better to resist the pressure, because those who will be ahead with the digital tools, they will conquer us without any weapons, classical weapons. So to resist this, we should be even better in digital world. And so this digital code should make us run even faster. I mean, not only banks and those in Moscow, but we need to digitalize every town and city in Russia. We should be the best when it comes to the digital services. Right, thank you. So I guess that this is mostly about practice. Okay, so Alexander, first, thank you very much for being here. You know, we should have some stimuli. I visit villages in Russia. I don't only live in Moscow, and I see that people in villages in Russia still don't know about digitalization, and I don't see them striving towards it. So in this respect, I hope that the digital code will give the impetus to this process. We'll go to Chuvashia, to your village, and we will see how digitalization will also influence those who work on the land. So, Alexander, first, thank you very much for coming here to this session. A couple of words about what we've already discussed. Those are the questions that I'd also like to pose to you. First and foremost, it's about digital code. As far as I understand, you are one of the initiators of this work. I was surprised to hear, but the digital code can be replaced by the information code, but it's still like a concept, an idea. You spoke somewhere and you said, I'm sorry if I'm wrong with the quote, you correct me, right? So the development and adoption of digital code is very important for the harmonization of our industry legislation that is lagging behind our lives. It's also quite important because there are some things that are missing, such as the protection of civil rights in the field of the digital. And there are no such principles enshrined, as well as there are no responsibilities of all the players in the market in this respect. We actually do have a law on personal data, and it is kind of a protection of a person in digital field. There is a system that regulates this field. We also have the digital profile. We have the system to regulate that. What are we missing? Why have you come up with this idea of digital code? Good morning, dear colleagues. I will try to add to what Alena has mentioned, and I will explain why I believe it's very important to develop and adopt such a document as digital code. Well, I've already heard a couple of arguments from Alena, and I do support it, and I'll give you some more arguments. What is a code? A code is a set of industry laws, and it is not only for practice, it also has a political meaning. So when we have some industrial code, it highlights the role of this field from the governmental point of view. Today, we have 21 codes in Russia. These are very diverse. But today, the topic of the digital field that actually includes such aspect as information, this is obviously one of the most important ones. when it comes to the existence as well as the development of the state and the society, because there is no economic industry today that could work without digital tools, including agriculture. Actually, agriculture enjoys one of the highest levels of the digitalization, and people who work on land, they also forecast weather, they also forecast the yield and the harvest. They do it through digital tools, and in online mode they can track what is going on their soil, let alone animals, and also it's very digitalized. I don't think that anybody will argue that today digitalization and information in our life is of no less importance for the government and for the society than the topic of trade and the code of marine operations. So the topic of digitalization is indeed of no less importance. So what are the challenges that we are facing and how we believe we should address them? The current legislation is quite diverse. You mentioned the law on the personal data, but it is just one element in this huge system on the topic of digital tools and information. Today, the laws that were adopted starting from the 90s, one of the oldest laws that we have today, it's not a federal act, it's a law. It's a law on the media, and it is dated 1992. We also have a law on communication, and it's turned 20 years. And today, the law on communication has something that we don't have in our life, so like pagers, some other means of communication. We have actually only one player now that works with some old types of communication, such as, for example, a telegraph. But what we have today in our life, it's not enshrined in the law. And so people that are not that deep into this legislation will not be able actually to read the law 149 on the information protection, because today this law is very chaotic. It's not a systematic one. We just add some elements and they're not homogeneous. We try to preserve the structure and logic, but it's difficult. It is connected to the fact that the development of digital world and information tools, they are developing very fast, and the pandemic actually gave a huge impetus to this, and the legislation is lagging behind. It doesn't mean that the legislation process is passive. It doesn't mean that legislators are not qualified, as well as the executive powers are not qualified. No, it's about not doing any damage. This is the key principle. Today we've come to an understanding, and I am very happy that today everybody has accommodated this idea that today we need to come up with a unified code, unified act. I guess that we should follow the framework approach here, and we need to identify the main areas of digital world and information. So we have some federal laws in Russia already, and they should also be reflected in this new code that will be developed. This is the law on the personal data, on the mass media, as well as the law on the information protection, the mail communication, some special communication, etc. Secondly, the future code should have something that we haven't yet adopted, that we are lacking today. And this is what was already mentioned. This will be the stimulus for us, the impetus, and we will have some planned scenario of our future movement. The same goes about the current laws, because we will be able to actually reprocess or review each of the laws that we have now. It should be an end-to-end process. Third point, today, in the law on personal data, And in many other laws, unfortunately, we don't say anything about the rights of a person in the digital field. We don't say anything about the rights and responsibilities of all the actors, including the state, including the industry, including the customer, a person, a citizen. And this code could address these issues. And since it's a digital one, we can argue about the title. I like the word digital, even though I can understand that maybe the word information is better from the legal point of view, but I guess the word digital code sounds better. And so since it's a digital code, then we assume that we shall discuss it as openly as possible in the digital format. So we will set up some resources, and everybody could suggest something, and we could organize a discussion around it, the discussion of things that we suggest.
Because it's a sort of like a public contract. The digital sphere is sort of like going more and more into our lives. Everyone has a gadget, and every week you got the stats, how long you spend on the screen, using the screen, and how long you spend it by day. So my stats are about 8 hours a day. So I've got 16 hours, without the screen. So what is actually happening? If we spend so much time in the digital world, if we spend more time in the digital world versus with our families, I think these sort of positions should be set into the legal sort of setting and context. So we gotta synchronize the legislation offline and legislation online. So all of the recent laws are connected with that. We're trying to distribute the rights and the norms that are in the regular world into the digital world that is sort of taking over and over more of our lives. Thank you very much. I gotta ask you a question to understand things better. You're talking the system of legislation that you're dealing with, Alena and other colleagues, the digital will be sort of something fixed, will have fixed principles in the legislation, and there will be other things, sort of like flowers on that legal tree that will be dealing with other processes, and this sort of like flowers can be changed. I mean, one of them is the law of the personal data. I mean, those things actually we had back in the 90s that we were dealing with them. So the code and the legislation, is that some kind of a model act, or there will be some sort of like blank kind of format and norms that are there, or those that deal with the rights and the legal aspect? I think it should be some kind of symbiosis of those things. I don't particularly like that analogy with flowers per se, but yeah, you're right. I mean, some of the different pieces of the flower that are there, we have a core, and then we have the rest. All right, thanks. It's quite a fundamental sort of share that you are giving, but we hope that whatever we'll be able to reach in the form of the new legislation, it's all important for us. What is really important is the protection of the personal data of the consumers and how we can use it within the development of the business world. I gotta give you feedback. It's not if that act will be created. It will be created. The act on the protection of the personal data. as one of the initiators and founders of the sort of like this process. So whoever the central bank wants to appoint to join our working group, I do welcome those colleagues to join us for our next meeting. As I said, I do want to have a public sort of like forum. It's not me sort of pretending for it to be, because it does deal with each and everyone. So I do welcome people to join us. It is a public contract in a way, whatever the agreement that we'll come to, and it needs to be regulated. Everyone has their own responsibilities. The citizens have their rights. Like recently we just accepted the law on the biometric data and everything, and there was quite a big discussion on that. I'm glad that we were able to formalize sort of like the final product that had maybe some compromises, but it was something accepted by each and everyone. The citizen has the right to reject the option of having his information, personal information, being used. It would not just write down that a citizen rejects, but we formulate it as a presumption. If his data is being taken without his consent, that is wrong. That is not according to the legislation that we had proposed. And there are certain responsibilities that come with it, responsibilities among those that do collect the data. I apologize for taking too much time, but thank you. Just one more question before we can pass on to the next speaker. So within the legislation, do you propose using AI? Will AI be one of the actors? Yeah, I mean, AI will be used as one of the sort of objects that we'll be using, but the details of the whole legislation, I mean, they're quite delicate, and but if we're talking about how to use AI as one of the sort of creators of the code, because I mean, we invited you, Alexey. You are welcome to bring sort of whatever AI comes up for you. Yeah, personally, I remember Mr. Gref talking the other day when he made a statement, and he was invited to discuss that topic later with the security services. So one has to be careful. You got to be careful with digital assets that do exist and being developed, especially in accordance with the legislation. If we go back to the question that I wanted to ask Anatoliy Kozlachkov back in Sochi with the Association of Banks of Russia. Well, the question there was also about using AI in the financial spheres. So Anatoly, you were the moderator at the time. But I believe that your Association of Banks of Russia, I mean, you have your own opinion. I think you could be a good addition to the team working for this working group. I mean, the industry has the final word in a way. So as I'm the last speaker, because we're the one who implementing everything. But I do agree with you. I've got 7 minutes probably. So someone has to sort of, like stir up this slow flow of discussion in a way. But I think I want to raise how one can start using AI. We've been talking quite about it. Some people think it's too early to talk about how to use AI in this legislation and other things. Some people think we shouldn't discuss that in a public forum. But we got a very good example in the State Duma. There are certain sort of numbers that I could quote, and some of the stats that comes out. This is from the observance section of the internet and how they implemented AI services. One of the banks was the one who developed this service for us, and I think the bankers can see whether it's going to fit on them with them or not. So you do understand how sort of like the control of the bank sphere is happening, in the digital world. After introducing the AI, what they saw is that more than 90,000 violations have been observed, more than 90,000 per day since they launched. And if you do compare it with the analog sort of control system, I'm just calling it the analog, but sort of registering these violations of different kinds have dramatically increased. I mean, all of these incidents, and it was 90,000 times more. I mean, this number is just beyond my comprehension. And that's what I wanted to talk about. What can we do about it? What are the ways to sort of like solve this issue? Should we leave it as things are in the analog? Like we thought we could see all of the violations sort of and digital crimes, and things would be easier. But in reality, the society does face a lot of different issues that gotta find solutions for that. And they need to find them in a very fast, sort of like a very comprehensive way. So first of all, we've got the data generated by AI. They should be regulated in a legal way. I'm talking about the abstract, I'm talking about the legal, whether it's administrative, whether it's criminal, whether it's civil law. We cannot go without it. Whenever the data is being sort of moderated and processed, we have the issue of who's going to be the judge. Will AI be the judge? And the subject of the sort of and the judge per se, to be more exact, of should be AI. In our association, we sort of try to how we can use AI to get rid of the social engineering. And things do work out in that regard, but there must be some status for that. But whenever we find the solution for that, we will have another issue to deal with. That the system of execution of certain decisions should be also coordinated by the system by AI. In other words, because in other words, you will not be able to sort of like solve and find the solutions. Well, there must be a person, a man. We're trying to modulate and see whether a person can be judged, and sort of could provide whether he could provide the rebuttals for some of the things. It's hard to talk about the stats of that. If you look at the criminal things, the 13% back in the Soviet days, 13% of different criminal cases were rebutted. But in our world, it's about 1 million of different cases. So of course AI should be able to help us with that. What I'm describing right now is a vector can develop and should be developed in the nearest future. I think I've just got a minute, and what I want to say is the central bank's report that was focusing on AI, the thoughts were expressed in a very sort of timid way that the central bank would be observing all of that. But in accordance with other banks, the central bank reported that it will be nearby the AI and sort of like observing the process. So standing next to, but not sort of trying to stop the process of using AI completely. But I think if it does happen, we could have that a monkey would be smarter than a human being. So yeah, I mean, monkeys cannot really understand humans, but now, you know, now, I mean, the system of AI, let's say, you know, will develop so rapidly and so much that the regulators, the human regulators, would not be able to control. But the methodology of observance and control should be developed in the way we use AI. The last thing I want to tell you, what is happening today with the development of legislation. We've got classical sort of like legal forms that, you know, more than 2,000 years old, and now they're being transformed. All of the lawyers understand that, but don't know really what to do with it. But us, those of us who are sort of deep in the creation of new laws, we need to come up with new way of cooperation, and especially on this sort of sphere, we need to assist to different committees, and some of you are here. We need the regulators, who is always there, and other members from the regulation committee. We shall not harm, we shall not break the eggs or throw the baby with the basket. I think if you're what you said just now, we would say it in the beginning, some people would be afraid, but I think you did a good job with that. I think producing the algorithm in the right way for AI is in the core, is the main thing, whether it's generative models or any other models. But all behind the scenes of all of that, as you said, I mean, more than 90,000 violations of different kinds. Of course, we really need to investigate whether it's a violation within the code, civil code, or any other code of the Russian Federation.
However, you are right, saying that AI is the object. There was some discussion about whether AI is an actor of an object. Still today, it's for us is an object. But well, some representatives of this industry aspire to become conscious actors. Definitely, we should work in this field, and our consultative report in this field actually talks about where we can apply AI and how we can do this. And I guess that it's indeed a good model how to regulate these relationships. We should regulate them, but we should be careful. So, dear colleagues, it's time for us to conclude. I see that our time is up, and we have to conclude. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank all the speakers. I guess we had an interesting discussion. It was diverse, multifaceted, and I would like to wish everybody good luck in the fields where you work and stay healthy. Thank you.